What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Hood Soft Life podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina, and in this podcast, we talk about navigating the challenges that come with growing up in the hood and leaving those challenges behind for a soft life. Growing up in the hood comes with its own set of challenges, but what people don't tend to tell you is not only do those challenges follow you once you've made it out physically, but they tend to intensify. So I'm bringing you along on my journey. I'm going to be honest with you about the struggles and the lessons that I'm learning to achieve a soft life. In this episode, we're going to be talking about it requires faith to get out of the hood. So, let's get started. Hello, happy Monday, everybody. I know that's super weird, but Wednesdays do not work for me anymore to be able to post the podcast, so we're moving to Mondays. I hope that this works for everybody. I feel like it'll be a great way for you to start off your week, and so I'm a little excited for a mini little rebrand in terms of like when we'll be posting, and also I need to tweak my description a little bit to include that I will be talking about faith a little bit more on my podcast than I did in season 1. With that, I just want to start off and say, how is your week going? Or how was last week, I should say, since this is a Monday. How was your week last week? What are you up to? Are you taking care of yourself? That's the biggest question I want to know. So just let me know in the comments how you're doing. Just a quick little update for me. I'm doing pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. At first, last week was very and then the week kind of ended off stressful. I even had to take a day off of work because I just was not feeling well. And I don't typically get sick. That's the thing about me. I don't typically get sick, and I just found myself feeling very ill and just I needed a moment to just rest and recover and really just get myself together. And so I feel good now. On Friday, the 7th, my church hosted a love night for singles, and I was one of the hosts along with my friend Imani. And it was a great event. I want to definitely shout out my minister in training at my church, Andrea. She did a great job putting that together. One of the women in my church, her name is Morgan. She did Pop the Balloon, but it was like a different version, of course. And it was just really fun. And so I'm glad I was able to go, especially because I was feeling kind of, like I don't want to go out. I'm tired. I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated. So I'm just really grateful that I got to go to that church event and be one of the hosts. And I had a really good time. That was pretty much like my week. I took some time to get myself together, really get my thoughts together. This morning I had some time to really just talk to God and explain like, this is where I'm at. And it's like, I know that you know. I know you're seeing what's going on down here. But I just really needed to talk to him directly and say, like, here's where I'm at. And I don't want to say, like, I'm struggling necessarily because I'm doing pretty good. I think more so it's just, like, I'm having a hard time with feeling fulfilled and feeling like I'm in a purpose-driven role as a teacher. I was just really talking to him about that and was just like, I'm a little nervous to go all in on what you've asked me to do. I feel the inspiration and I feel the motivation for short periods of time, but I feel like there are times where I'm a little just nervous because I feel like I'm not deserving enough for you to change my life drastically in the way that I picture in my mind sometimes. And I know that you're giving me that vision, but for some reason, I just feel like that's not the case for me. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in this episode. But let's go ahead and jump into our topic for today. It requires faith to get out of the hood. And honestly, this episode might be a little bit different for you because I'm going to be talking a little bit about my faith journey and just how I got to where I'm at right now. And I know I'm not anywhere near the finish line. I'm not anywhere near perfect, quote unquote, or where I want to be in terms of my faith. But compared to where I started and where we are now, it has been a drastic change. So let's just jump right in. Okay, y'all, I want to start off by saying that I got baptized on January 26th, 2025, and it was the best decision I could have ever made for my life. And how I came about that was a little spur of the moment, quote unquote. And I say that because I had been thinking about getting baptized since like November-ish, since I really started diving more into my faith and spending a lot of time with God, spending time in His Word. And so I knew I wanted to get baptized, but because I moved to DC and all my friends and family, for the most part, live back in Connecticut or Massachusetts, I wanted them to be there. So I had talked to my church and I had asked them, like, when do you guys host baptisms? How does that work? And they said they do them quarterly. So the first one would have been in February. The next one would have been a few months after that, whatever. Turns out the first baptism they were hosting was January 26th, and the next one would have been in April. I was like, okay, well, I'll just do April so that my family and friends could come and da-da-da-da. But if you're a woman, you just never know when that's going to be the case for you. So I was just like, I'm good right now. Like, this month is good and I really want to do it. And I don't want to be held back just because my friends and my family aren't here for me. And I don't want to wait for them. I don't really need to wait for them because this is supposed to be a declaration of my love and my relationship with Jesus Christ one-on-one. And so I love my friends and I love my loved ones and family and all that extra stuff, but I decided to get baptized on January 26th in the middle of church service. I was just like, I think I'm ready to do this right now. I don't need to wait until April. I don't really need to wait for anybody because you just never know what the case is going to be. You never know if you'll go out tomorrow. You just never really know. And I had that conviction on my heart for a little while. And so I just decided that I was going to go ahead and go through with it. And honestly, watching other people get baptized was so beautiful, and just seeing how much they love Jesus and how much they're ready to fully pursue that walk if they haven't already, and just really dive into the relationship, whatever that looks like for them. I'm just somebody on the outside looking in. It was just so beautiful to watch, and they had their friends and their family. Some people had kids that were there to support them, and it was just amazing to see. And so when it got to my turn, I wasn't necessarily sad that there wasn't anybody there for me, but it did feel different. And, of course, my church and the people who were there were very supportive. And so I get in the tub and it is freezing cold. But I get in there and, they baptize me and I just feel great. I feel like what I felt was that I'm fully ready to pursue the thing that God has for me. I'm fully ready to pursue the life that He has for me, the things that He wants me to do, the person that He wants me to be. That was like the biggest shift that I felt almost immediately, because I feel like in my 24 years of life, I've had an idea of what my purpose was. I've had a solid foundation of what my purpose is supposed to be, but I never felt ready enough or motivated enough to fully dive into that. I think the biggest thing was that I felt unqualified and that I felt like I couldn't do it alone. And I can't, honestly. Like, it's going to require a lot of faith. It's going to require a lot of trust in God for me to be able to pursue the purpose that He has for me fully, to get to the life that He wants me to have. I need Him by my side in order to do that. And so I'm very glad with my decision. I'm very happy about that. And honestly, if you had came up to me 3 years ago and said, oh, you're going to get baptized and you're going to be super excited about that, I would have kind of just been like, I think you have the wrong person, in all honesty. But I want to talk a little bit about my faith journey, because I would have never thought that I'd be getting baptized. I never thought that it would be a big deal to me. I never really thought that I'd be just in the position that I'm in right now in terms of my faith, and I'm super grateful for that. And so I definitely want to share my story, because I'm sure there are people out there who are struggling to accept God's love or to accept God in general. They feel like they might not be deserving enough of God's love. Whatever the case is for you, I feel like sharing my story will help you understand that there are a lot of people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, and that even though it's so challenging and it's so difficult right now, things can change. They definitely can. I want to start off with middle school. I grew up in a Puerto Rican household, and traditionally Puerto Ricans are Catholic, and we were quote unquote Catholic. And I say that very, very loosely, because we didn't really go to church. We didn't study the Bible. We had pictures of Jesus and we had crosses in our house. Yeah, all of that extra stuff. And I knew about God, and I had some idea about like prayer and Jesus, but nothing even above. I wouldn't even say it was surface level. It was just more so like intro for kids. You give a little bit and kind of just like, we'll let that marinate for now. But it never really went past the like, we'll give you a little bit and let that marinate. And so when I went to middle school, I went to a Christian school, and they never outwardly said that they were a Christian school, but looking at it now, it definitely was. I think they just weren't trying to force it on people, but we said prayer every morning. We had at least 3 different prayers. We had Circle of Peace, where we prayed for people, and we had all this extra stuff, morning announcements, da-da-da-da-da. And we had to take a religion class. That's where I started to learn a little bit more about God, a little bit more about Jesus, Moses, influential characters in the Bible, all of that extra stuff. But again, it was very surface level, and it wasn't like, here's how you can apply what you're learning to your life. And I kind of understand that. I mean, in middle school, you're anywhere between the ages of 10 and 13 and 14. So it's just kind of like, we'll just ease your way into it. So that was all fine. So I was starting to get a little bit of knowledge of like who God is and what does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to be this? And I didn't really know the difference between being a Christian and being Catholic. And there is a difference. But then I went to a private Catholic school, and that was like a huge culture shock. I mean, we had the uniforms, and we had nuns in our school, and we had religion class for all 4 years, and all of that extra stuff, and people would talk about getting confirmed, and we had mass once a month. To this day, I still don't really understand what confirmation is. If anybody wants to let me know, I'm interested in learning a little bit more about that. 4 years in a Catholic school, and I still don't understand what that means. But they would talk about like getting confirmed, and we had mass once a month. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to just keep it a buck with you 110%. I hated mass. It was so boring. And the thing about it is, it's like the word of God is not even boring. It's just like, it's a high school. And they were preaching, it was like this older man who was preaching stuff that was not applicable to our lives and not teaching us like how to understand the word of God or why what he's saying is important. I feel like I didn't really get that. And I'm going to take accountability and say that I wasn't 110% open to what he was saying either, because I was kind of just like, whatever. But then on top of that, it's like whenever I would try to lock in, it's just like, this is boring. This is so boring. And so I joined the orchestra solely so that I wouldn't have to necessarily sit through the mass and just only focus on that. Yeah, I had to sit there for the whole thing, but at least I was playing some of the music, so I would be more focused on that than listening to the word of God, because I couldn't digest what my guy was saying. I'm not even going to hold you. And we would have religion class, and I started to learn some things that I wasn't 100% like okay with. I didn't necessarily like the teachings. And I understand that in the Bible it says, like, marriage is between a man and woman and all of that extra stuff. I understand that. But the way it was taught that, like, being gay is horrible and being gay is, like, so bad and da-da-da, it was just like they were demonizing the people instead of the sin. You're supposed to love the sin or hate the sin. And I couldn't get behind that. And I couldn't get behind the, like, extreme homophobia that we were learning about, and I couldn't get with the hate. I really couldn't. I didn't like it. And then I also just didn't really understand how we were supposed to be learning about love from God and how God loves all his kids and we're all made in his image, but there was clearly an issue with racism and colorism in our school that nobody wanted to address. And so I didn't really like that either. And a lot of people in my circle, we would just talk about that and just be like, well, you're going to say one thing, but here's our lived experience and here's another thing. And so it's just like, we're not practicing what we're preaching, and that's not cool. It got to a point where the people around me who were doing these teachings, or even some of the students that I went to school with, were pretty much impacting my relationship with God. It was just like, okay, you're telling me that this is the God I'm supposed to believe in, a God who hates gay people so much so, and a person that is okay with racism. This is what you're telling me. This is what your actions are showing me. I don't get jiggy with that God. I don't like that version of God. I don't want anything to do with that. I kind of was just like, I'm going to go ahead and take a step back from this. This doesn't align with me. I really do try my best to accept and love all people. It's challenging sometimes when it's people who really just are testing you and pushing your buttons, but I really do try to love and accept all people. And so the fact that you're pushing these messages of like hate and that oppression is okay in certain aspects, I can't get with that, especially as a person of color. And so I started to take a step back, and then I was really struggling with depression and anxiety and, trigger warning, suicidal ideation in high school, because I was just going through so much with my family, and the racism in school was just so bad. And so I was just struggling with that. It was like I would go to school and experience all these ignorant comments about race and racism and these quote unquote jokes that these people would be telling me and my friends. And then I would go home and essentially hear like the same kind of comments, even though I grew up in a house full of people of color. And I was just really struggling because it just felt like no matter where I went, I wasn't accepted. And I was starting to think of it as like, well, God put me in this situation. Why would he allow racism? Why would he allow slavery? Why would he allow these things? And so I only started to fixate it on the bad. And I was just like, well, why would he allow kids to die of cancer? Why would he allow this? Why would he allow that? And I just started to get angry and literally living in a spirit of anger and frustration and just turning my back to God at any opportunity that I had. But I was still taking communion, which was crazy of me. And so I was just so frustrated because it was just like, why would you let all these bad things happen to me? And not just to me. Why would you let all these bad things happen in the world? Why is racism such a big deal? That why aren't you stopping these things? And I was so upset and so frustrated. And I was just like, this can't be the God that people keep trying to tell me about. Of like, he loves us all and he cares about us all and he's protecting us all. Who is he protecting? Because black people are still subject to racism and race-based trauma and killings based solely of the color of our skin. How is it that I'm supposed to believe in a God who would allow these things to happen? And I get a little emotional just talking about it because it's just like I was in such a bad place, and I feel like they didn't do a good job of teaching us that like God really does care about us. God really does love us. I feel like because of their own personal, I don't want to say agenda because I feel like that makes it a big deal, but because of their own personal beliefs being inflicted in their teaching, they taught me the wrong things. And they pretty much taught me what they wanted to spew out. And you know how people will commit acts of violence and say that that's God's will? It kind of felt like that. Of course, not to that major extreme, but it was just like, you're saying that racism is okay because God's not doing anything about it, or because you are actively spewing out ignorant stuff about race and racism. I was just really struggling with that, and I was at a point where I was just so angry. I wanted nothing to do with God. Anytime I heard the word God, I would roll my eyes and just get so annoyed. I'm like, he doesn't care about us. He doesn't love us. Like, if he loved us, why would we be going through this? Why would we be going through all this pain? Why would I be struggling with depression and anxiety? Why would I be so suicidal? Like, I just don't want to be here. And I would be struggling so badly. And then there wasn't really anybody that I could turn to because, like I said, my family was very surface level Catholic, and we didn't have the best relationship. And so I was just ruminating in that every single day and still going to school every single day. And it got to the point where I was visibly depressed. I had gained like 70 pounds, and in my senior year of high school, I looked like a completely different person. I was just angry all the time and just extremely agitated. And I still had mass at school. We still had religion class and whatever. And I would ask all these questions. And I was pretty much the devil's advocate person, where it was just like, oh, well, you say this, that, and the third about God. Well, what about this? And what about that? And just trying to overturn anything that we were getting taught. I will say I did have one religion teacher, Mr. McLaughlin. I think that was his name. And I feel like he did a good job of like teaching us about God and teaching us about religion in a way that was healthy. But because I still had a cold heart and I was still had a closed mind, I wasn't 100% listening to what he was saying. I was more so listening to respond and listening to argue back. And what I did like was that he came with the energy, okay? Like, if I was like, well, what about this and that and the third? He'll be like, well, the Bible says so and so, or what about this? And give me like actual examples. And he'd never take it personally. He would just be like, you have these questions and I got the answer. And so I really did like that. Going into college, I was still struggling with depression. I had gotten I always say kicked out. I had gotten kicked out of my house, and we were just arguing all the time, me and my family. And so I was really still struggling with depression and anxiety. And I had a new level of anxiety because I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, not knowing that at the time, but I knew I wanted to finish. And so there was all this pressure of like, well, now I got kicked out. I really have no choice but to graduate. I really have no choice but to actually do this because I couldn't have gone through all of this for nothing. And so I was struggling greatly. And I just remember like getting on the floor and just crying and being like, well, God, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, why would you put me through all of this? Why would you give me this family? Why would you give me these parents? Da-da-da-da-da. Again, still only focusing on the negative that he has done for me or done to me, quote unquote, and not necessarily focusing on all the good that he has done for me. Because despite all the challenges that I went through, I got to go to that private Catholic school for free. I got to go to college essentially, I wouldn't say for free because I do have student debt, but with very little debt compared to a lot of other people here in the U.S. And I'll get to it, but during college when COVID hit, the school had closed down and we were trying to figure out like, what does that mean? And so the school closed down and I told like the president of the school, like, listen, I don't have a place to go. What am I supposed to do? And so they were like, you can stay till the end of the semester. You just won't get your refund, and then like we'll give you some time to figure it out. And if you want to stay, like you would just have to pay to continue to stay throughout the summer. And I didn't have that kind of money, so I was homeless. I still had a place. I still had a roof over my head, but essentially, like once this ended, like once the semester ended, I didn't have nowhere to go, and I was trying to figure out, well, where was I gonna be? And I was frustrated, and I was just like, now I'm about to be homeless, and I don't know. And I wasn't turning to God. I wasn't asking him for anything. I wasn't asking him any questions, whatever the case may be. But I had this couple, the Malleys, who really cared about me, and they were pretty much like my adoptive parents. They did everything for me. They helped. They celebrated my birthday. They got me gifts for Christmas and whatever. They helped me get through high school so that I didn't have to owe them any money. And they helped me through college. And they were just like, well, why don't you come and stay with us until you figure out like what you can do? And so I ended up living with them, and they let me stay there rent free, and they let me really stack up my money. I ended up buying my first car while I was living with them, and I worked a lot of hours while I was living with them. That was truly a blessing because I really had no idea where I was going to lay my head at, and I was honestly really nervous because I didn't know where I was supposed to go and where's my stuff supposed to go. And like, yeah, I know I'll have a place to come back to like when the semester starts up again, but that's like 3 months of summertime. Where am I supposed to go for 3 months? Where am I going to take a shower? Where am I going to put my stuff? And so I was just really upset and nervous, but God blessed me with people who allowed me to stay at their home for free, work and stack up my money so that I didn't have to be homeless, so I didn't have to go to a shelter, and so I didn't have to be couch surfing all the time because I didn't really have that many friends. So it wasn't like, oh, I could stay with them. My college roommate had offered for me to stay with her family, but I was just like, no. I was too prideful, and I wasn't willing to stay at her house. And it was a lot. And I'm just really grateful because a lot of people don't get that opportunity. People have to drop out of college because they don't know what they're about to do and they have no choice but to get a job. But God blessed me with these people that allowed me to save my money, allowed me to buy a car. Eventually, I moved out of their house and I had an apartment with some roommates, but it was hard. And like, we were going through COVID. There were all those killings with like police brutality going on during that time. I was really struggling. And I had become a version of myself that I couldn't even recognize anymore. I just remember, like, I was on their floor, and I was just bawling my eyes out. And I was just so depressed. And I was just like, what am I supposed to do? And trigger warning for y'all, like, I was really ready to just kill myself. I was really just ready to end my life because it was just so much. And I just couldn't believe, like, I couldn't believe that that was the life God wanted me to have. And it wasn't. And like the people that I stayed with in Malleys, like they went to church every Sunday. They were involved in their church. They prayed a lot and stuff like that. And they would ask me to join them, and I'd kind of be like, like, okay, out of respect, but not because I was like into it for myself. And I think I ended up telling them, like, I'm really just struggling. I don't think I ever really went in depth with them about like I wanted to end my life, but I just told them, like, I'm struggling with depression and I don't know what to do, and I don't think I can afford a therapist or whatever the case may be. And luckily I ended up getting a therapist through my college and just talking to her and just saying, like, there's just too much on my plate. Like, I'm struggling. Mind you, COVID was still going on, so school resumed, and I was still living with the Malleys because the school was still closed. And so we were taking classes online, and I pretty much worked full-time hours, and there was still so much going on with isolation and police brutality. And so I was so depressed, and I was so miserable, and I was a person that I did not recognize. Give me 1 second, y'all. But that was kind of like my first push to start understanding like who God is and what is this goodness that I hear people talking so much about, because I felt like all I was seeing was just negativity and just pain and trauma and evil. I felt like that's all that I was seeing. And so I'm like, I want to see what God has for me, because I'm at rock bottom and we really don't have nowhere else to go at this point. Like, what do I have to lose? Like, I had already been at rock bottom. I already felt like ending everything. I had even told my advisor in college, I want to drop out. I can't do this anymore. I'm just overwhelmed. I have too much going on. And I just told her, like, I'm working all the time. I have all this stuff going on in my personal life. I'm overwhelmed with all this police brutality, and I cannot take it. I'm depressed. And she really helped me. It was like, you could graduate early. Do you want to do that instead? And I said, yes, I'd rather graduate early and do and make sure that all this work wasn't for nothing than to drop out. But it took me a while to get to the point where I was like, yeah, let me just graduate early. Because at first I had my heart set on just dropping out and just being like, I'm done. Like, clearly this is the path that I'm supposed to have. I'm not supposed to be the first person in my family to graduate. I'm not supposed to be the person in my family that's supposed to do anything with their life. I'm supposed to just go back to the hood and essentially perpetuate the same generational patterns. That's clearly what my life is supposed to be. But after just talking with my advisor, she was like, I really do see you having the ability to graduate early, and not just because of the credits, but most importantly because you're so smart. Like, you've done so much. And she knew a little bit about my personal life, and she was like, you've done so much on campus. You've passed these classes. A lot of them I passed with like honors. And so she was like, you can do it. You don't have to drop out. Even if you took some time off, if you wanted to do that, don't just drop out, because you're literally so close. And so I ended up finishing college, and I finished a semester early, and I was grateful for that. And then I started working full time. And just fast forward into my first year of teaching, I was in the same situation again, where I'm just like, well, what do you want from me and whatever. I feel like I just never was like fully open to what God wanted me to have. I was never fully open to God's love. And so it was such a challenge. And I kept going back to that dark place because honestly, the enemy had a huge stronghold on my entire life. Like, he was really, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. There's no doubt about that. And God gave me a beautiful purpose for my life, a purpose that on the outside looking in seems impossible. But what's crazy about it is that the enemy saw my potential long before I ever could, and was working overtime to get me to a point where I doubted God. I hated God. I turned my back against God. I do all these things to avoid God as much as possible, because if I turn my back on God, if I avoid God, if I hate God, how am I going to fulfill my purpose when I need him to do that? That is exactly what the enemy wanted. And so he really had me in a chokehold body slam combo. I'm going to keep it real with you. And I was just down again and again and again. And it took me a couple of times where I was struggling that deeply, where I'm on the floor crying out to God, saying, well, what else do you want from me? What do you need? What am I supposed to do? What do you want? Because that's how I felt. I just felt like, well, what do you want from me? Because I keep trying and I still keep failing. So what is it that you need from me? And it wasn't until I moved to DC and I was removed from the people who had caused me trauma, the places that I would go to where I experienced trauma. Once I was finally removed from that is when I could fully start to heal my relationship with God. And again, if you haven't seen my video where I talk about moving to DC and my 2024 experience, I talked about how I was depressed and I was anxious. And you can see in the video that I'm crying. And there were a lot of nights like that. And I've only been here for a couple of months, but there were so many nights like that. I think that was the final push I needed of like, I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling like this, what feels like almost twice a year, where I'm at the point where I'm on the floor and I am crying out and I am begging God to help me, because I'm trying. And it's just like, I know what you want me to do with my life. I know what my purpose is, but for some reason, I cannot get there. For some reason, I still get angry with you. I'm still angry. And I was holding on to a lot of anger. I was holding on to a lot of anger towards God, towards my parents for abandoning me, towards my upbringing, towards the racism and the disrespect that I had experienced in high school, towards all of that stuff. And I was just like, I'm so done with this. Like, how can I let this go? How can I move on? And I started reading the Bible. And I have friends who are Christian, and I have friends who have go to church and who read the Bible and do all that extra stuff. And they would kind of talk to me about it, but I wasn't 100% like ready for all of that. And I ended up asking them, like, can we start doing a Bible study? And I would just talk to them and be honest. And like, I know you guys won't judge me, and I know you guys like have more experience when it comes to faith and Christianity and whatever. So I need y'all's help. And that was kind of like the first opening door of just talking to them and just saying, I don't know where to start. This Bible is thick. Where do you start reading this? Like, how do you digest this stuff? And so I had some amazing friends. I have some amazing friends who helped me, and they were like, these are some ways that you can learn how to read the Bible. There's all these different methods, and here's where you should start reading in the Bible, and whatever the case may be. And so I started doing that, and I started getting into my word, and it really did start to help. And I felt like for the first time I had full clarity without all this weight of anger and resentment and frustration clouding my judgment. And so I started looking for a church because, yeah, it's cool to listen to sermons online, but I wanted a community. I wanted to be able to fellowship with people, to talk to people face to face about some of the things that I have questions about or some of the things that I'm struggling with. And I love my friends dearly, and I would go to them face to face if I could, but I cannot because we don't live in the same state. And so I started looking for a church. And of course, on my timeline comes Born Again Ministries, the church that I go to now here in the DMV area. And I'm like, okay, this looks like a church that I could go to. It's giving young Black energy, young Black excellence. And so I go to the church, which is literally 10 minutes from my house. It just couldn't have worked out any better than it has. And I end up really enjoying it. I like the people, and the people look like me, and the people are around my age, and the sermons are relatable to me. And it felt good to be able to find a church that I went to of my own volition, number one, that the people looked like me, number two, they understood what I was going through, number three. Even though I never fixed my mouth to say that I'm struggling with this, the sermon always just hit a little different. It always came from my edges, eyebrows, or eyelashes, or all three in some way, shape, or form. And so I just fell in love with the church, and I was just super grateful that God gave me a church that I aligned with and that could be able to help me grow my journey with Him even more, because listening to a sermon on YouTube can only take me but so far. Like, if I had questions for the pastor, how am I going to ask my questions? Where like now I can go to church, and if I got questions, I could follow up with my pastor. I could follow up with some ministers in training, whatever. My church has Bible study, and I like going to the Bible studies in person or the women's fellowships on Thursdays on Zoom. I can do that. I couldn't do that if I just watched the sermons on YouTube. And so I say all of that to say that I started off kind of and I went through some really dark trials and tribulations throughout my time and throughout my journey to get to this point where now I have a church that I love to go to, and I'm involved with my church as much as I can be because I'm at max capacity. I'm not even gonna lie. But I have a church that I can go to. I have a community at my church that I enjoy talking to and seeing, and I'm making friends in my church, and I'm getting into my word, and I'm getting to my relationship with God. And I've gotten to the point where I've gotten baptized, where I analyze the music that I listen to, the things that I watch, and I'm really trying to take that seriously because God has really delivered me through some crazy things. And it took me a long time to understand that all the bad things that happened in my life weren't God. But He allowed them because at the end of the day, they drew me closer to Him. It was really the enemy coming for my life because he saw my potential. He saw my purpose, and he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And honestly, that stings. The enemy, the man or the being, whatever, the spirit who literally has faith in evil and hurt and pain and trauma, that being, that spirit believes in me more than I believe in myself, more than I believe in God. He believes in God more than I do. And that just came from me because it's just like, okay, so the enemy clearly has seen my purpose since the day I was born and has worked overtime to make sure that I destroy my life. And he still failed. Yeah, it took a lot of times. And yeah, he had me at some points. I'm not even going to pretend like he didn't. He had my life at some points. But at the end of the day, God still said, like, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to love you always. I'm going to accept you. I'm going to be there for you when you are ready to come to me. I'm not going to force you. And I'm so glad that it doesn't work that way. Because if God had forced me to be like, come over here and I need you to understand that this is how, whatever. No person wants to be forced into love in an earthly relationship. Why would I want to be forced into love in a spiritual relationship? I don't. And so I'm just super glad it doesn't work that way, because if I didn't go through all of these things, and if I wasn't really, 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 really down bad at some points in my life, I would have never gotten to this point where I've gotten baptized and where I feel light. And that doesn't mean that my life is perfect. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect by any means, but my life looks different. And if you see me falling out on the floor, it isn't because I'm depressed. It isn't because I'm angry and anxious. It's because I am grateful. It's because I am thankful. It's because he has really saved my life from some things that I couldn't even open my mouth to say publicly ever. And so I'm just truly, truly, truly grateful for God's love and for my entire faith journey, even the things that really had me falling out on the floor begging for help, even all the things that made me feel like God didn't care about me, every part of it, all the mistakes that I've made, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have never gotten here. And I don't like to play that game of, well, what if I change this one thing? Because I wouldn't be who I am if I changed even one thing about my journey. So I wanted to share that with y'all, because I feel like there are people, especially people who have grown up in the hood, who don't believe that God will change their life because of the circumstances that they're in right now, or because of the traumas that they've experienced in their past, or whatever it is. They don't believe that it can happen for them. And it can. It definitely can. And I'm not anywhere near my dream life, but I do have a lot of prayers that have been answered, and I had to take the time to write that down, because it can get hard to remember the things that God has done for you when you feel like that's just your day-to-day life. You feel like that's how life's supposed to go, but it's really not, because at any point in time, your life can end. At any point in time, your life can make a turn that you didn't expect, whatever the case may be. And so I'm just really grateful. I'll never forget that I used to pray, crying. I want to move. I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want to be in Connecticut. I don't want to be in Massachusetts. I don't want to be here. Here I am at 24, about to be 25, and I live in the DMV area. And it's felt like for a long time, like moving was never going to be a possibility, especially because when I moved here, I was broke. I have no money. And so the fact that God made a way for me to move out here, it is so possible. And I want to share my journey while I go through it, because I feel like if I had said this and now I have luxury cars and a mansion and I travel the world every 2 weeks, whatever the case may be, if my life had looked like that, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't be able to resonate with what I'm saying, because it's just like, oh, well, this is such a dramatic extreme. And it's just like right now, I'm in the middle. Like, I'm not at the point where I'm in the hood and I'm miserable and I don't believe that God can fix things. And I'm not at the point where I've achieved all the things that he wants me to, or that I'm living out fully his purpose for my life. I'm not there yet. I'm right in the middle, where it's like I'm getting close and I'm moving the needle and I'm about to be there. And that doesn't mean that my journey ends. That doesn't mean my life ends, God willing. But it just means that I'll finally have gotten to what felt like the impossible when I was sitting on the other side in the hood 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And so I just truly hope that, like, me sharing my testimony and my journey will help people understand that, like, God can really do the things that seem impossible to you right now. God can really change your life. And I'm not even talking about materialistic things. I'm not even talking about money. To be free from depression, to be free from anxiety, to be free from suicidal ideation, to be free from all of that stuff, to be free from anger. That is a huge blessing that I never thought would be possible. Okay, some people may not know what it means to get baptized, so I just want to talk a little bit about that. My church says that to be baptized is a public declaration of your love for Jesus Christ and your relationship with Jesus Christ. And so That was what I did. I made my declaration and my love for Jesus public. I felt like for a long time, like I couldn't post pictures of me like going to church or videos of me going to church or reading my Bible or whatever, because I felt like that was very attention seeking and attention grabbing, and like I kind of had to keep my relationship under wraps, not because I'm ashamed, but because if I do make my relationship public, now all of a sudden I'm looking for clout, I'm looking for attention. But I've reached a point where it's just like I will talk about God openly and willingly to whoever asks, and even if you didn't ask, it's on my timeline, it's on my podcast. This is a huge part of me and my life, and my relationship with God is essential. It's essential to anything and everything that I do. There will be no podcast without God. There will be no life in DC without God. There will be no me without God. There will be no you without God. And so, of course, I'm going to talk about him every chance that I get. And other times where I'm still a little uncomfortable because there are some people who will make you feel bad or who will make you feel weird for the fact that you talk about Jesus. Sometimes, yeah. But then I'd be pushing that aside of like, this man died on the cross for me and for my life. He has saved me from some crazy stuff. Yeah, I'm going to continue to talk about him. Yeah, I'm going to wear that sweater that says that Jesus loves you. And do I get a little anxious about what people's reaction is going to be? Kind of. But then it's just like, well, who cares? Who really cares? Like, none of these people are going to risk their life to save mine. And I'm not asking them to. Jesus already paid the debts for me in his blood. And so I'm going to talk about him every chance that I get. And so I'm just super grateful and super thankful. But what does it mean to get baptized? And I want to talk about that because I feel like a lot of people assume that when you get baptized, it means that you're supposed to become this perfect Christian who is covered from head to toe and and you don't make mistakes, whatever. That's not true. That's not true. For me, anyways, getting baptized means that I am fully dedicating my life to Christ, and I'm also acknowledging the fact that I am human. I'm going to make mistakes. I will never be perfect. I am a sinner. That's just the case. But I work hard to make sure that I'm getting into my word, that I'm fulfilling the purpose that God has for me, that I am doing the things that he wants me to do, that my relationship with God is at the forefront of anything and everything that I do, and that his will for my life is the will that I take, even if I don't want it. Even if I'm like, well, I would have preferred this. Well, we've made this declaration for our life, and we already know that trying it our own way has gotten us nowhere. So we're going to do it his way, even if it feels like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Well, this was not what I asked for. Well, this was not what I wanted. I'm welcome to do it my way if I want to, but I'm always going to learn that that's not the way that it rolls. He's going to allow me to test the waters and make my own mistakes for sure. He's always going to allow that, whether I got baptized or not. But at the end of the day, I've already learned time and time again that it doesn't work in my favor. It really doesn't. And sometimes it's a slow lesson to learn. It's a slow burn. Other times it's just immediate. And so getting baptized doesn't mean that I'll be a brand new person tomorrow and I'm never going to curse again, or I'm never going to listen to secular music again, or I'm never going to do these things again. I'm never going to make a mistake. I'm going to be perfect. And I'm going to always want to volunteer and da-da-da-da. No, that's not what that means. It just means that I will always make sure that I put in my effort, the best of my abilities, to get closer to God, to build my relationship with God, to be the person that he wants me to be, and to abide by the laws that he has created for my life. That's what that means to me, anyways. Again, I just want to offer up a little encouragement to anybody who is considering starting their faith journey, or maybe you're at the point where you have your back turned to God because of all the things that you have been through. I want to tell you right now, those things that you are going through is the enemy coming for you, because he sees your potential. He sees the purpose that God has for you, and he believes it. He believes in you more than you do. And that's why he is working overtime. That's why it always feels like there's one thing after another, whatever the case may be. But also acknowledge where you've made some mistakes too, because sometimes we get to a point where we don't really look at ourselves and say, well, I should have never made that mistake, and that's what got me here. One is enemy attacks. Two, take accountability for the fact that you've made some mistakes that might have gotten you to this point, if that's the case. But also understand that despite any of that, God still loves you and he cares about you, and he doesn't want you to live this life of pain, of misery, of suffering, of trauma. That is not the intention that he has for you at all. He wants you to live a life of peace, of comfort, of love, of joy, of fruitfulness, purpose. Those are the things that he wants you to live a life of. And so it might be hard to slowly start to turn your face towards God after you've had your back to him for so long. Just do it. You really have nothing to lose. How beautiful could your life be if you decided to give your life to Christ, if you decided to have a relationship with him, to accept him willingly? You really have nothing to lose. If you're at rock bottom, or you feel pretty close to rock bottom, or if you just straight up don't like where you are right now, what do you have to lose by opening yourself up to seeing what he has for you? All right, y'all, that was a ride, but we are at the point where we've reached the affirmation for this week's episode. And the affirmation for this week is, I trust that God will provide everything I need. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that 3 times. If you have the ability to close your eyes, close your eyes. However you want to speak this positivity onto your life, find a way to do it. So, I trust that God will provide everything I need. I trust that God will provide everything I need. I trust that God will provide everything I need. All right, y'all, that is all I have for you this week. Again, let me know what your thoughts are about me posting on Mondays. But I'm super, super ecstatic that I got to share now on this podcast, because I did post my video about my baptism, but to share a little bit about my faith journey and about my baptism and how I got to this point. And again, if you are struggling, turn to God. You have literally nothing to lose. And what you'll gain by giving your life to God and by loving God and accepting his love is unmatched. And so let me know what your thoughts were for this week's episode. I know it was a little different. If you aren't following us on social media, you can follow us both on Instagram and TikTok at the HSL Pod. We are on all streaming platforms, including YouTube, and I post lifestyle content where I talk about faith, fitness, and just life in DC as a 20-something-year-old. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit about my life outside of the HSL podcast, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok, both at sabrina.lizette. That is Sabrina, SABRINA.LIZET, Lizette. And until then, I'm going to catch you on the next one. Bye.